Before we start, hit subscribe if you want more stories like this. Drop a like and comment where you're watching from. Now let's get into it. My name is Rebecca Whitmore, and in 1997, I was a Special Investigations Officer with the National Park Service assigned to Olympic National Park in Washington State. Most people don't know the NPS has an investigations unit. We handle the cases that don't fit the normal pattern, the disappearances that feel wrong, the incidents that need to stay quiet. Olympic National Park covers nearly 1 million acres. Temperate rainforest, rugged coastline, and mountains that hide more secrets than any government file. I'd been working there for 6 years when the pattern started. At first, it looked like standard missing persons cases. Hikers who didn't come back, day trippers who wandered off trail, solo campers who stopped checking in. But there was something different about these cases. Something that made my supervisor pull me aside one morning in September 1997 and hand me a file marked Restricted Access. "We have a problem," he said. His name was Gerald Morrison, 23 years with the Park Service, and I'd never seen him look worried before. That day he looked worse than worried. He looked scared. I opened the file, 12 missing persons reports from Olympic National Park, spanning from January to August 1997. All of them experienced hikers. All of them vanished without a trace in different areas of the park. Search and rescue found nothing. No bodies, no evidence of animal attacks, no signs of foul play. "That's unusual, but not unprecedented," I said. "Keep reading," Morrison replied. I flipped through the reports. Each missing person had one thing in common. Their campsites were found intact, tents still standing, food still packed, gear still organized. Like they'd just stepped away for a moment, but there was something else, something that made my stomach tighten. At each campsite, arranged carefully near the tent entrance, were personal items that didn't belong to the missing hiker A. Watch. A compass, a canteen, a pocket knife, small objects perfectly placed, clearly intentional. "What am I looking at?" I asked. "Evidence," Morrison said. "Evidence of something we don't understand. Each missing person's campsite contained belongings from previous missing persons, arranged in specific patterns, always near the tent, always when we find the site empty." I stared at the photographs. At campsite number 1, found in February, there was a single item, a wedding ring on a flat rock. At campsite number 2, found in March, there were 2 items. That same wedding ring, plus a digital watch. At campsite number 3 in April, 3 items, the ring, the watch, and a folding knife. Each new campsite added one more item to the collection. "It's escalating," I said. "It's been escalating for longer than 8 months, Morrison replied. He pulled out another file. This one was older, pages yellowed with age. "We've been tracking this pattern since 1987. 47 people missing over 10 years. And every single campsite shows the same behavior. Items from previous victims arranged and displayed." "Who's arranging them?" I asked. "That's what you're going to find out," he said. "Whatever is taking these people, it wants us to know. It's leaving us messages, and the messages are getting more elaborate." I spent the next week reviewing every case file. 47 missing persons, men and women ranging from age 22 to 61. Experienced outdoors people, all of them. Nobody stupid or reckless. Nobody who should have just vanished. The pattern was clear once you saw it. The first disappearance in 1987 left no arranged items because there were no previous victims yet. But starting with the second victim, the arrangements began. 1 item from victim 1 at the campsite of victim 2. 2 items at the campsite of victim 3. 3 items at victim 4. By 1997, with 47 victims total, The most recent campsite contained 46 items arranged in a perfect spiral pattern on a flat section of ground near the tent. 46 personal objects, each one traceable to a specific missing person, all placed with deliberate care. Something was collecting people, and it was keeping trophies. I requested access to the restricted areas where the disappearances clustered. Morrison approved it, but assigned me a partner. His name was Tom Garrett, a law enforcement ranger who'd worked Olympic for 15 years. He was in his early 50s, weathered face, and the kind of guy who didn't waste words. When we met at the trailhead, his first words were, "You read the files." "All of them," I replied. "Then you know this isn't something we advertise," he said. "We tell families it was animal attacks or accidents. We tell the media there's no pattern, but there is a pattern, and it's getting worse." "How much worse?" I asked. He looked at me for a long moment. "The arrangements are changing. Used to be simple. Items placed in a line or a circle. Now they're complex, geometric, almost like symbols. Whatever is doing this, it's learning. It's experimenting." We hiked into the backcountry, heading toward the last known campsite victim, 47. A 34-year-old woman named Jennifer Mills had disappeared 3 weeks earlier. Her campsite had been photographed and documented, but left undisturbed per Morrison's orders. He wanted me to see it in person. The hike took 4 hours through dense rainforest. Massive trees blocked most of the sunlight, creating a permanent twilight even at midday. Everything was wet. Moss covered every surface. The air smelled of decay and growth happening simultaneously. "We're close," Tom said. He'd stopped talking an hour into the hike, his eyes constantly scanning the forest around us. When we reached the campsite, I understood why Morrison wanted me to see it in person. Photographs didn't capture the scale. Jennifer Mills' tent was still standing, slightly collapsed from rain but intact. Her backpack sat outside, undisturbed. And arranged on the ground in front of the tent, in a pattern that looked almost like a mandala, were 46 items: watches, compasses, chiffonets, jewelry, wallets, keychains, sunglasses, bandanas. Each item placed with precision, creating concentric circles that spiraled inward to a center point. At that center was a single item that didn't belong to any known victim. A small, carved wooden figure, maybe 3 inches tall, depicting a human form with elongated limbs. "That wasn't in the photographs," I said. Tom crouched down next to the arrangement. "No, it wasn't, which means something came back after we documented the scene and added it. I felt my skin crawl. We photographed this 4 days ago?" "4 days ago," he confirmed. "Nobody's been here since. This area is restricted. No hikers, no rangers, nothing. Whatever placed this figure did it in the last 96 hours. "Can I touch it?" I asked. He shook his head. "Not until we photograph everything again. But Rebecca, look at it closely. Tell me what you see." I knelt down, careful not to disturb anything. The wooden figure was crude but deliberate. The proportions were wrong. Arms too long, legs slightly bent, head tilted at an odd angle. It looked almost like a child's drawing of a person, simplified but unsettling. "It looks handmade," I said. "Carved from a single piece of wood. No paint, no markings, just the shape." "Now look at the arrangement," Tom said. "Look at how the items are placed around it." I studied the pattern. The 46 items formed 7 concentric circles, each circle containing objects of similar type. The outermost ring was all metal items. The next ring was fabric, then plastic, then leather, then glass, then paper. The innermost ring, just around the wooden figure, was all jewelry. "It's organized by material," I said. Tom nodded. "Which means whatever is doing this can categorize objects. It understands the difference between metal and fabric, between organic and synthetic. That's not animal behavior, Rebecca. That's intelligence. We spent an hour photographing and documenting everything. I used tweezers to carefully pick up the wooden figure, placing it in an evidence bag. It was lighter than I expected, the wood dry and brittle like it had been carved years ago, not days. As we finished, Tom stood up and looked around the clearing. His hand rested on the gun at his hip, a gesture I'd seen him make several times during the hike. "Something's watching us," he said quietly. I felt it too, that pressure on the back of your neck, that animal awareness of being observed. The forest was too quiet. No birds, no insects, no rustling of small animals in the underbrush. Just silence and the occasional drip of water from the canopy above. "We should go," I said. Tom agreed. We packed up our equipment and started back toward the trailhead. Neither of us spoke for the first mile. Then Tom broke the silence. "You're going to want to talk to Eleanor Vasquez," he said. "She worked here in the 80s when this started. She was the first investigator assigned to the case, retired in 94, lives in Port Angeles now. She knows things that aren't in the files." "What kind of things?" I asked. "The kind of things Morrison doesn't want in writing," he replied. "Eleanor saw something out here, something that made her request early retirement. She'll talk to you if you mention my name." That evening, I drove to Port Angeles and found Eleanor Vasquez living in a small house near the water. She was in her late 60s, gray hair pulled back, sharp eyes that studied me carefully when I showed my credentials. "Tom sent you," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am. I'm investigating the disappearances in Olympic, the arranged items. I was hoping you could tell me what you know." She invited me in, poured coffee, and sat across from me at her kitchen table. For a long moment, she just looked at me, weighing something internal. Then she spoke. "How many victims now?" she asked. 47 confirmed, I replied. She closed her eyes. "When I started investigating in 87, there were only 3. I thought I could solve it. Thought I could find the person or animal responsible. I was wrong on both counts." "Why did you retire early?" I asked. She opened her eyes and met my gaze. "Because I saw it, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to normal life with that knowledge in your head." "Saw what?" "The collector," she said. "That's what I call it. I don't know what it really is. Maybe it's an animal we haven't categorized. Maybe it's something else. But it collects people, Rebecca. It takes them and keeps them. And the items it arranges at the campsites, those aren't trophies, they're messages." "Messages saying what?" She leaned forward, saying it wants more, saying it's patient, saying it's been here longer than we have, and it will be here after we're gone. The arrangements get more complex because it's learning about us, studying us. Each victim teaches it more about human behavior, human objects, human patterns. "Where did you see it?" I asked. "Mile marker 42 on the Hoh River Trail," she said. "Summer of 93, I was investigating a campsite alone. Stupid mistake, but I thought I could handle it. The site was fresh. Victim had been missing less than 48 hours. I was photographing the arrangement when I heard something in the trees. Not footsteps. More like branches moving, but heavy. Deliberate." She paused, her hands gripping the coffee cup. I looked up and it was there 30 feet away, partially hidden by a massive cedar tree. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, but hunched over like it couldn't fully straighten long arms, longer than they should be, hanging down past its knees. The proportions were all wrong. Like looking at a human stretched and distorted, I couldn't see its face clearly because of the shadows, but I saw its hands. They were too large, fingers too long, almost delicate looking despite the size. "What did it do?" I asked. It watched me. For maybe 30 seconds that felt like an hour. It just stood there watching. Then it moved one of those long arms and pointed, not at me. at the arrangement on the ground, like it wanted to make sure I saw it, understood it. Then it stepped back and disappeared into the forest. No sound, no crashing through underbrush. Just gone. I filed my report. Eleanor continued. Described what I saw. Morrison buried it. Called it exhaustion and stress. But he knew. He knew I was telling the truth because I wasn't the first person to see it. There were reports going back to the 50s. Rangers and hikers seeing something tall and wrong moving through the deep woods, always in areas where people later disappeared. "Do you think it's still out there?" I asked. She looked at me like I'd asked a stupid question. "Of course it's still out there, and it's still collecting. You're investigating it right now, aren't you? That means it's active. That means somewhere in Olympic National Park it has victim number 48 or 49 or 50, because it doesn't stop, Rebecca. It never stops." I left Eleanor's house with more questions than answers, but one thing was clear. Whatever was taking people from Olympic National Park wasn't random. It was systematic, intelligent, and it had been operating for at least 50 years, probably longer. Back at park headquarters, I requested access to older files. Morrison initially resisted, but eventually gave me access to archived reports from the 1950s through the 1980s. I spent 3 days reading through yellowed documents, handwritten notes, and old incident reports. The pattern went back further than anyone had admitted. As far back as 1952, there were reports of missing hikers whose campsites showed evidence of arranged items. The reports were sporadic and poorly documented, but they were there. Over 70 years, I estimated at least 90 people had vanished with the same signature. Arranged belongings. No bodies, no witnesses, until now. Because I'd found something in the old files that changed everything. A report from 1956 written by a ranger named Thomas Whitaker. He'd investigated a fresh campsite, less than 6 hours after the hiker was reported missing. And he'd included a detail that later reports omitted. He'd heard voices. Multiple voices coming from deep in the forest speaking in unison. Not words he recognized, but rhythmic sounds, almost like chanting. He'd followed the sounds for 20 minutes until they stopped abruptly. When he returned to the campsite, a new item had been added to the arrangement. A pair of hiking boots belonging to the missing person. The hiker had still been alive 6 hours after disappearing, and whatever took them, it wasn't alone. I brought this to Morrison's attention. He read the report twice, his expression growing darker. "This doesn't leave this office," he said finally. "We can't have people thinking there's some kind of cult operating in the park." "What if there is?" I asked. "What if this isn't one entity but a group? What if they're keeping the victims alive?" Morrison stood up and walked to the window overlooking the park. For a long moment he didn't speak. Then he turned to me. "If they're keeping victims alive, then where? We've searched those areas dozens of times. Helicopters, search dogs, thermal imaging. We've never found caves large enough to hold people, never found structures or camps. If there's a group holding 90 victims somewhere in this park, where the hell are they?" That was the question, and I was starting to think I knew the answer. But it was an answer that would require me to go deeper into Olympic National Park than any official search had ever gone into the restricted zones. Into the areas marked on old maps with warnings written in languages I didn't recognize. Into the territory of the collector. Morrison approved my expedition into the restricted zone, but with conditions. I wouldn't go alone. I'd take Tom Garrett and 2 other rangers I didn't know. Both with military backgrounds. We'd carry weapons and emergency beacons. And if we found anything at all, we'd retreat and call for backup. No heroics. The restricted zone was a 12-square-mile area in the northwestern section of the park. It had been closed to public access since 1974. officially due to unstable terrain and risk of landslides. The unofficial reason was in a file I'd read marked confidential. In 1973, a survey team had gone into that area and reported strange structures, not natural formations. Built structures, primitive but deliberate. When a larger team went back to investigate, the structures were gone. We started our hike at dawn. Tom led, followed by the two other rangers, Mason and Chen. I brought up the rear, carrying 60 pounds of gear including climbing equipment, first aid supplies, and enough food for 5 days. We didn't plan to be out that long, but in the restricted zone, plans meant nothing. The first day was uneventful. We followed an old trail that had been abandoned for decades, overgrown but still traceable. The forest here was different from the tourist areas. Older trees, thicker canopy, less undergrowth. Everything felt bigger, heavier, more permanent. Like we'd stepped back in time to when the forest was young. On the second day, we found the first marker. It was a cairn, a stack of rocks about 4 feet tall, placed in the center of the trail. But the rocks weren't local. They were smooth river stones, the kind you'd find near water, not on a mountain trail. Someone had carried them here deliberately. "This is new," Tom said. "I've been through here 3 times in the last 10 years. This wasn't here last month." We photographed it and continued. An hour later, we found another cairn, then another. They formed a line leading off the main trail into an area so dense with trees we'd need to cut our way through. "They're guiding us," Chen said. He was younger than the rest of us, maybe 30, with the cautious eyes of someone who'd seen combat. "Whoever built these wants us to follow." Mason disagreed. "Could be a warning. A boundary marker. Don't cross this line." "Only one way to find out," I said. We followed the cairns. The forest grew darker as we moved away from the trail. The canopy was so thick that even at midday it felt like twilight. Our flashlights cut through the gloom, illuminating massive tree trunks and hanging moss that looked like curtains. After 2 hours of slow progress, the cairns stopped. We emerged into a clearing about 50 yards across. In the center was a structure. Not a building exactly, more like a framework. Dozens of branches lashed together with what looked like dried vines, forming a dome shape about 15 feet tall. And hanging from the framework, arranged in deliberate patterns, were objects. Hundreds of objects. I approached, slowly, Tom, right behind me. As we got closer, I realized what I was looking at. Personal items. Watches, glasses, wallets, keys, jewelry, clothing. All hanging from the framework like ornaments on a tree, and each item was arranged in a specific order. Metal items on the east side, fabric on the west, organic materials north, synthetic materials south. "It's the same categorization system," I said. "The same organization pattern from the campsites. But this is the mother lode. This is where all the items have been going." Tom circled the structure slowly, counting under his breath. When he finished, he turned to me, his face pale. "I count over 300 items," he said. "If each item represents one victim, we're not looking at 90 disappearances. We're looking at 300 plus. That's 70 years of collection," Chen said. "Since the late 40s at least." Mason was examining the ground around the structure. The earth had been cleared of vegetation in a perfect circle, extending about 10 feet from the framework, and in the cleared dirt I could see marks. Not random marks. Symbols carved into the ground. Repeated patterns of lines and circles that looked almost like a language. "We need to photograph everything," I said. "Document the whole site before we disturb anything." We spent an hour taking pictures from every angle, documenting each section of the structure. Cataloging as many items as we could identify, I was photographing the western section, when I noticed something that made my heart stop. One of the items hanging there was a NPS radio, standard issue, the kind every ranger carried, and clipped to it was an ID badge. I used my zoom lens to read the name, Thomas Whitaker, the ranger from 1956, the one who'd heard voices and reported them. He hadn't retired or quit like the record said. He'd disappeared, and his radio had ended up here, arranged carefully among hundreds of other trophies. "Tom," I called out, "come look at this." He looked at the radio and the ID, his jaw tightening. Morrison lied. Whitaker didn't leave the Park Service, he was taken. How many other rangers? I asked. How many people in those missing persons reports were actually taken? Before Tom could answer, Chen shouted from the far side of the clearing, "Over here! You need to see this!" We ran over to find Chen staring at something on the ground past the framework. It was another clearing, smaller than the first, and in it were more structures. Not frameworks this time. Shelters. Crude huts made from branches and mud, formed into dome shapes just large enough for a person to crawl inside. There were 47 of them, arranged in concentric circles around a central fire pit. "Someone's living here," Mason said. He had his weapon drawn, scanning the tree line. "We need to leave. Now." "Wait," I said. "Count the shelters. Count them carefully." Chen counted aloud. When he reached 47, he stopped and looked at me. "That's the number of victims since 1987, I said. "The number from the recent pattern. One shelter for each person taken." "Then where are they?" Tom asked. "Where are the people?" As if in answer, we heard it. Voices, multiple voices speaking in unison, coming from somewhere deeper in the forest, not words I recognized. Rhythmic sounds, rising and falling in a pattern that felt almost like a song. The same sounds Thomas Whitaker had described in 1956. The voices were getting closer. "We need to move," Mason said. His military training had kicked in. He was already backing toward the tree line, weapon raised. Chen followed, moving in a crouch. Tom grabbed my arm. "Rebecca, we have to go." But I was staring at the shelters. Because one of them, the one nearest to us, had movement inside a shadow passing across the opening. Someone was in there. "There's someone alive," I said. "In that shelter, I saw movement." "We don't have time," Tom insisted. The voices were closer now, maybe 100 yards away. I pulled away from him and ran to the shelter. Tom cursed behind me but followed. I knelt down at the entrance, small opening barely 2 feet across, and shined my flashlight inside. A face looked back at me. A woman's face, pale and dirty, eyes wide with fear. She was huddled in the back of the shelter, wearing torn clothing that had once been hiking gear. When she saw us, she opened her mouth but no sound came out. Just a hoarse gasping like she'd forgotten how to speak. "We're NPS," I said. "We're here to help. Can you come out?" She shook her head violently, pressing herself further back into the shelter. Then she raised one hand and pointed past us toward where the voices were coming from. Her expression was clear. Terror. "What's your name?" I asked. "When did you go missing?" She stared at me for a long moment. Then, with obvious effort, she spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper, rough from disuse. "Jennifer," she said, "Jennifer Mills, 3 weeks ago. Victim 47. The woman whose campsite I'd examined, she was alive." "Are there others?" I asked. "Are all 47 people here?" She nodded. Then she pointed again, more urgently. "They're coming," she whispered. "You have to hide. They'll make you stay. They'll make you part of the family." The voices stopped suddenly. The forest went silent. In that silence, I heard something worse. Footsteps. Many footsteps, moving through the underbrush with purpose. coming from multiple directions, surrounding us. Into the trees, Tom hissed, now. We ran for the nearest massive cedar, one with a trunk wide enough to hide all four of us. We pressed ourselves against the bark, weapons drawn, barely breathing. I could see the clearing with the shelters through the branches, and I watched as they entered. There were at least 20 of them. They moved in a line, walking upright but with a strange gait, like their joints didn't bend quite right. They were tall, most over 6 feet, wearing clothes made from animal hides and strips of fabric. Their hair was long and matted, but what froze my blood was their faces. They were human faces, but wrong. The proportions off, features slightly distorted, like looking at people through warped glass. And they all moved in perfect unison. Same pace, same stride, same rhythm. They walked to the center of the clearing and stood in a circle around the fire pit. Then, as one, they turned their heads and looked directly at the shelter where Jennifer Mills was hiding. One of them approached the shelter. It knelt down, moving with that same strange jointless motion, and reached inside. A moment later, Jennifer crawled out. She didn't struggle or try to run. She just crawled out and stood there, head down, while the figure inspected her. Then, the figure did something that made my skin crawl. It reached out with one long-fingered hand and touched Jennifer's face, gently, almost tenderly, like a parent checking a child's temperature. And Jennifer didn't flinch. She just stood there, eyes closed, accepting the touch. The other figures watched. Then they all turned as one and looked at the shelter next to Jennifer's. Another figure knelt and reached inside. A different person crawled out. A man, this time, older, with a gray beard. He stood next to Jennifer, same posture, same submission. One by one, they called people from the shelters. 47 people emerging, standing in a line. All of them with that same defeated posture. Some were recent, their clothes still recognizable as modern hiking gear. Others were older, wearing clothing from decades past. One woman near the end wore a dress that looked like it was from the 1960s. They'd all been here for different lengths of time, but they all looked the same. Blank expressions, hollow eyes, moving only when directed. They'd been broken, trained, made compliant. The tall figures arranged the 47 people into a circle around the fire pit. Then they began the chant, that rhythmic sound we'd heard earlier, and the people, all 47 victims, joined in. Speaking in unison, voices overlapping, creating a sound that wasn't quite human but wasn't quite anything else either. I felt Tom's hand on my shoulder, squeezing hard. A warning, don't move, don't make a sound. We watched for what felt like hours, but was probably 20 minutes. The chant rose and fell. The figures moved around the circle, touching each person briefly, and the people accepted it. No resistance, no fear, no hope of escape. Finally, the chant ended. The tall figures dispersed, melting back into the forest. The 47 people returned to their shelters, crawling back inside like animals returning to their dens. Within minutes, the clearing was empty again. Silent. We waited another hour before moving. When we finally did, we moved fast. No discussion, no stopping. We needed to get out of the restricted zone and call for backup. We needed a full tactical team, hostage negotiators, medical personnel. We needed to plan a rescue operation. We made it 3 miles before they found us. Chen spotted them first. Movement in the trees on both sides of the trail. The tall figures, at least a dozen of them, pacing us but staying out of sight. Watching. They know we're here, Chen said. He had his weapon raised, scanning the tree line. Keep moving, Tom ordered. Don't stop. Don't engage unless they attack first. We picked up our pace, almost jogging now. The figures kept pace effortlessly. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of one through the trees. That strange elongated form, those two long arms, that wrong way of moving. Then they stepped onto the trail ahead of us, 3 of them blocking our path, standing shoulder to shoulder, not threatening but not moving aside. Their faces were clearer now in the daylight. Human faces, but the eyes were wrong. Too large, too dark, like someone had painted eyes onto something that didn't have them originally. "We need to talk," one of them said. Its voice was human but flat, emotionless, like someone reading words they didn't understand. "We need to explain you're frightened, you don't understand the family." "We're federal officers," Tom said. "We're investigating missing persons. Those people back there need medical attention. They need to come with us." "They are family," the figure said. "They are happy. They are home. You saw them, they sing with us, they rest with us. They belong. They're prisoners," I said. "You're holding them against their will." The 3 figures tilted their heads in unison, an unnatural movement that made them look like puppets on strings. "Will is difficult," one of them said. "Will changes. At first, they have will. They want to leave, they cry, they fight. But the family is patient. The family teaches. The family shows them belonging. After time, they forget old will. They learn new will. Family will." "How long?" I asked. "How long have you been taking people?" The figures looked at each other, then back at us. "Time is difficult. Many seasons. Many cycles. We remember the first family member, he was lost, cold, alone. We found him, we taught him, he stayed. He became family. Others came, lost, cold, alone. We found them, we taught them, they stayed, they became family, always growing, always learning, always family." "Let them go," Mason said. He had his weapon aimed at the center figure. "Let them go or we will take them by force." The figures didn't react to the threat. They just stood there, heads tilted, watching us. Then the center one spoke again. "You are lost, cold, alone. You can be family. You can learn belonging. You can stop searching. You can rest. The family welcomes all who are lost." Behind us, I heard more movement. More figures emerging from the forest. We were surrounded. At least 20 of them now, forming a circle around us. All of them standing still, watching, waiting. Tom's voice was steady, but I could hear the tension underneath. "Rebecca, get the emergency beacon ready. We're going to need immediate extraction." I reached for the beacon on my belt, but before I could activate it, one of the figures moved, faster than something that size should be able to move. It was on me in seconds, long fingers wrapping around my wrist, not squeezing, not hurting, just holding, preventing me from reaching the beacon. "No call," it said. "No others. Family only. Learn first, then choose, stay or go. But learn first. Understand family first around us." The other figures closed in, their hands reaching out, touching us gently, almost lovingly. And I realized with growing horror what they were doing. They were welcoming us, trying to add us to their family. And if the 47 people back in those shelters were any indication, eventually we'd stop resisting. Eventually we'd learn to belong. The collectors, that's what I'd started calling them in my head, led us back towards the clearing. Not roughly, not violently, almost gently, like parents guiding children, their hands on our shoulders, guiding but not forcing. And that somehow made it worse. "We could fight," Mason whispered. "Take our chances." Tom shook his head slightly. 20 of them, 4 of us, and they move faster than anything human should. We'd last maybe 30 seconds. He was right. I'd seen how fast they could move when they wanted to. The one that grabbed my wrist had covered 10 feet in less than a second. If they decided to actually hurt us, we wouldn't stand a chance. They brought us to the clearing with the 47 shelters. The other victims, the family, as the collectors called them, were emerging from their shelters. They arranged themselves in a circle, standing perfectly still, watching us with those hollow eyes. I recognized Jennifer Mills among them, standing between an older man and a teenager who couldn't have been more than 16. The collectors positioned us in the center of the circle. Then one of them, the one who'd spoken before, stepped forward. It looked at each of us in turn, those two large eyes studying us with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "You will learn," it said. "You will understand. Family is not prison. Family is belonging. We show you. You watch. You see. Then you choose." "What if we choose to leave?" Chen asked. The collector tilted its head. "If you truly choose, you can leave. But choice requires understanding. You cannot choose what you do not understand. So first, understand. Then, choose." It turned to the circle of victims and made a sound. Not words. A clicking noise, rhythmic and complex. The 47 people responded immediately, moving in unison. They formed pairs, then groups, then reformed the circle. All without speaking, all perfectly synchronized. Like a dance they'd practiced 1,000 times. "See," the collector said. "They understand, they know their place. They know their purpose. They belong." "They're conditioned," I said. "You've broken them. Made them dependent on you." The collector looked at me. "What is difference between condition and teach? Between break and reshape? Your society conditions. Teaches children to sit still, be quiet, obey rules. Are children broken or improved? We improve. We teach better way without confusion, without pain of choice, without loneliness." "You're justifying kidnapping," Tom said. The collector made that head tilt again. "Words are difficult. Kidnap suggests taking against will, but will is temporary. Today's will becomes tomorrow's regret. We take lost ones, ones who wander too far, ones who separate from their group, ones who are already leaving their world. We give them new world, better world, world where they belong." It gestured to the circle of victims. "Ask them, ask if they want to leave." The collector made another clicking sound. The 47 people stopped moving and turned to face us. Their expressions remained blank, but I could see their mouths moving. All of them speaking the same words in unison. "We are family. We are home. We are happy. We are complete." The words were flat, emotionless, but synchronized perfectly. Like a recording played back 47 times simultaneously. "You programmed them," Mason said. "Brainwashed them. We taught them truth," the collector replied. "Truth they forgot. Humans are social creatures. Need belonging. Need purpose. Need family. Your society promises these things but does not deliver. People stay lonely even in crowds. We deliver what society promises, real belonging. Real family." I looked at the 47 faces staring at us, tried to see past the blank expressions to whatever person remained underneath. Some of them had been here for weeks, others for years. A few, based on their clothing, had been here for decades. How much of their original personality was left? How much had been erased and replaced with this family programming? "Where did you come from?" I asked. "What are you?" The collector was quiet for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice had changed. Less flat, more uncertain. "We do not remember beginning. We know we are old, very old. We remember when the forest was young. We remember when your kind first came to this land. We watched, we learned, we tried to understand. You're native to this area? Tom asked. You've been here for centuries? Longer, the collector said. We were here before the tribes your history remembers. Before the ice. Before the mountains took their current shape. We have always been here, watching the lost ones. Sometimes taking them, sometimes teaching them, always trying to understand what makes your kind complete. Chen spoke up. You're experimenting on us, using humans to understand human behavior. The collector made a sound that might have been agreement. We observe, we learn, we try to help. Your kind is always searching, always unsatisfied, always alone, even when together. We offer solution. We make family, real family, permanent family. At what cost? I asked. You strip away everything that makes them individual, everything that makes them human. Human is difficult, the collector replied. What is human? Memory, emotion, choice? We preserve memory. We protect from negative emotion. We provide choice. Once they understand, we improve human. Remove painful parts. Keep useful parts. As it spoke, I noticed something. The way the other collectors were standing, arranged in specific positions around the clearing, creating a perimeter but also a pattern. And the victims in their circle were doing the same thing. Everyone positioned precisely, no random movement, no casual adjustment of posture. Everything deliberate, everything ordered. They're afraid of chaos, I realized, of unpredictability. That's why they organize everything. The items arranged by material, the shelters in perfect circles, the synchronized movement. They're trying to impose order on human randomness because they can't understand it any other way. Tom must have realized the same thing. His eyes met mine, and I saw understanding there. He turned to the collector. You said we can choose to leave after we understand. Does that mean you'll let us go right now? We understand what you're trying to do. We just disagree with your methods. The collector regarded him. You do not understand yet. You know facts, but do not understand truth. Understanding requires experience. Stay with family 3 days. Learn our way. Feel belonging. Then choose. 3 days was too long. Morrison would send search teams when we didn't report in. But search teams would become more victims, more people to add to the family. I needed to buy time, but not in a way that brought others into danger. 1 day, I said. Give us 1 day to observe, to understand your family, then we'll make our choice. But you have to promise that if we choose to leave, you'll let us go unharmed. The collector tilted its head, considering 1 day is short. Understanding takes time. You've been trying to understand humans for centuries, I said. If you can't make us understand in 1 day, maybe the problem isn't how long we observe, but what we're observing. Maybe your family isn't as complete as you think. It was a gamble, playing on their obvious need to prove their system works, to validate their centuries of experimentation. The collector looked at the others arranged around the clearing. They made no sound, no obvious communication, but after a moment the first collector turned back to us. 1 day, it agreed. You will stay. You will observe. You will participate. Then you will choose. If you choose to leave, you may leave. This is our promise. The collectors moved us to 4 empty shelters at the edge of the circle. The structures were barely big enough to crawl into, and once inside, there was only room to sit or lie down. The floor was covered with dried moss and leaves, and in one corner was a wooden bowl containing water. They crawled into their shelters at night, Chen said from the shelter next to mine. He'd positioned himself so he could see through both entrances. They're nocturnal or close to it. That's why attacks and disappearances happen during evening or early morning hours. Everyone stays in the shelters during night hours, Tom said from his shelter on my other side. No one moves around. It's probably a survival mechanism, predator avoidance from when they were fewer in number. So we wait until dark, Mason said. Then we make our move. We spent the day observing the collectors had the victims perform various tasks. Gathering firewood, arranging stones in patterns, maintaining the shelters, processing food. Everything was done in perfect synchronization. When one person bent down to pick up a piece of wood, 3 others bent down at the same time. When one person walked to the fire pit, 5 others walked in parallel paths. It was mesmerizing and horrible. Watching people move like parts of a machine, all individual thought and action subsumed into the collective will I recognized. Jennifer Mills multiple times throughout the day, but there was no recognition in her eyes when she looked at me. She'd been part of the family for 3 weeks, and already she moved with the same automated precision as the others. As evening approached, the collectors began their chant. The same rhythmic sounds we'd heard before. The 47 victims joined in, their voices blending together into a sound that wasn't quite music and wasn't quite language, but something in between. During the chant, I noticed something. The collectors were focused entirely on the ritual, their attention fixed on the circle, on maintaining the rhythm, on ensuring every voice was synchronized. They weren't watching us. For the first time since we'd been captured, they weren't watching us. Tom saw it too. Now. He mouthed silently. We moved fast. Out of the shelters, staying low, heading for the tree line. Chen and Mason went first, Tom and I following. The chanting continued behind us, covering the sound of our movement. We reached the trees and kept going, not stopping, not looking back. We ran through the forest, abandoning stealth for speed. Behind us, the chanting stopped abruptly. Then came the sounds of pursuit. Multiple footsteps, moving fast, crashing through the underbrush without the careful silence they'd used before. "They're coming," Chen gasped. We'd been running for maybe 10 minutes and already we were exhausted. The collectors didn't seem to tire. "The trail," Tom shouted. "If we can reach the main trail, we can activate the beacon." We changed direction, heading toward where we thought the trail should be. The forest was completely dark now, our flashlights the only source of light. The collectors didn't use lights. They moved through the darkness like they could see perfectly, their footsteps getting closer. Mason stumbled and went down. Before he could get up, one of the collectors was on him. It grabbed his arm with those long fingers, pulling him up almost gently. "Go," Mason shouted. "I'll slow them down." We couldn't leave him. But we also couldn't stop. More collectors were closing in from other directions. Tom made the decision. He pulled out his weapon and fired twice into the air. The sound was deafening in the quiet forest. The collectors froze, all of them stopping simultaneously like someone had hit a pause button. In that moment of frozen silence, Tom grabbed Mason and pulled him forward. "Run," he ordered. We ran. The collectors remained motionless for maybe 5 seconds. Then they resumed pursuit, but more cautiously now. The gunshots had surprised them, made them wary. We burst onto the main trail. I pulled out the emergency beacon and activated it. The device immediately started transmitting our GPS coordinates and an emergency distress signal. Help would be coming. The question was whether it would arrive in time. The collectors emerged from the tree line, at least 30 of them now, forming a semicircle around us. But they weren't attacking. They were just standing there, watching, waiting. The one who'd spoken before stepped forward. "You chose," it said. "You chose fear over understanding. You chose to run rather than learn." "We chose freedom," I replied, "something you can't offer because you don't understand it." The collector tilted its head. Freedom is illusion. Choice is illusion. Humans think they choose, but they are controlled by fear, desire, habit, society. We remove illusions. We offer truth, true belonging, true purpose. You offer prison, Tom said. Dressed up with philosophy, but still prison. The collector regarded us for a long moment. Then it did something unexpected. It stepped back. The other collectors did the same, widening the circle you have chosen, it said. We honor choice. You may leave. But know that the lost ones will always be here. When your society fails them, when they are alone and afraid and searching, we will find them. We will offer them family, and some will choose us, because we offer what your world does not. In the distance, I heard the sound of helicopters. The rescue team was close. The collectors heard it too. They turned as one and melted back into the forest, disappearing within seconds. All except one. The speaker remained, looking at us with those two large eyes. The family remains, it said, always watching, always learning, always growing. You cannot stop what has existed for centuries. You can only choose whether to understand it. Then it was gone, vanishing into the darkness like it had never been there at all. The rescue team arrived 20 minutes later. 3 helicopters, a full tactical squad, and medical personnel. They found us on the trail, weapons drawn, staring into the forest. They found Mason's gear scattered where he'd dropped it during the fall. They found evidence that we'd been in the area. But when they went to the restricted zone to find the clearing, the shelters, the 47 victims, they found nothing. No structures, no evidence of habitation. Just pristine forest, unmarked and undisturbed, like it had all been erased. The only proof we had were our photographs. Images of the framework with hanging items. Pictures of the shelters arranged in circles. Photos of the victims standing in formation. But photographs can be dismissed, called fake or altered. And that's exactly what happened. Morrison took our report. He listened to everything we said. Then he filed it under the same classification as all the other incidents, restricted access. Confidential. Not for public disclosure. The official story was that we'd gotten lost in the restricted zone, experienced group hallucination from dehydration and stress, and been safely extracted. No mention of the collectors. No mention of the victims still alive. No mention of the family. But Morrison did one thing. He expanded the restricted zone. Closed another 15 square miles to public access, increased ranger patrols along the boundaries, and he updated the missing persons protocols. Any disappearance in Olympic National Park now triggers an immediate response. No more waiting 72 hours. No more assuming they'll turn up. It's been 28 years since that expedition. I left the Park Service in 2003, unable to continue investigating cases I knew would never be solved. Tom retired in 2008. Chen and Mason both transferred to other parks within 2 years. But I still track the missing persons reports from Olympic, and the pattern continues. 1 or 2 disappearances per year. Always experienced hikers. Always vanishing without a trace. Always with campsites that show evidence of arranged items. The family is still there, still growing, still collecting the lost ones. And somewhere in the restricted zones of Olympic National Park, in clearings that don't appear on any map, victims from 70 years of disappearances are living in perfect synchronization, moving together. Thinking together, belonging together. They've forgotten their old lives, their old names, their old selves. They are family now, and the family is forever.